The diverse nature of the Palestinian identity has been largely overlooked throughout the years. But Israel's war on Gaza, which continues to divide communities across the world, is offering an opportunity for people from different ethnic, religious and cultural backgrounds to share their experience of life under occupation. I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream. The old city of Jerusalem has been home to Muslims, Christians and Jews for centuries. But Israel's long-standing policy of illegal displacement and dispossession is threatening its diverse communities who have been uniting in their struggle for a chance of a future of coexistence and justice for all. We start today's episode with a plunge into the rich history of the region with Zachary Foster, a historian on Palestine, who's also a descendant of Holocaust survivors. Zachary, thank you very much for joining us here on the stream today. Occupied East Jerusalem has become a symbol of the challenges faced by different ethnic and religious groups in attempting to coexist in Palestine. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the city?
So when Israel conquered the West Bank and Gaza and Jerusalem in June 1967, it massively enlarged the city of Jerusalem, drew a massive municipal boundary around all of these villages previously which were just villages in the West Bank, and annexed East Jerusalem into Israel proper. However, it annexed the territory, but it didn't grant the people living in the territory Israeli citizenship, which is why, of course, East Jerusalemite Palestinians are not given Israeli citizenship. They have to apply for it, and in most cases, they're denied when they apply for it. They're given residency permits, blue IDs, and those blue IDs can be taken away from them. And it's something like 15,000 Palestinians have been stripped of their residency status in East Jerusalem over the past 56 years.
And Zachary, you're Jewish. You did not grow up facing what some of these other ethnic and religious groups experience. How did you become a historian on Palestine?
Look, my grandfather grew up in Poland, and when he was in college, he was forced to flee. There was rumors that the Nazis were the Polish police, who were at that point allied with the Nazis, were about to enter his town, which they did. He was able to escape shortly before they entered, but they came into his town and they murdered his entire family. He had, I believe, 9 brothers and sisters. Every single one of them was who was still left in Poland at the time was murdered. His parents were murdered. His entire family, extended family, was murdered. He got out. And it was his experiences, kind of hearing those stories, that I think led me to be much more sensitive to people experiencing oppression, people fleeing persecution. And so when I hear what East Jerusalemites go through, when I hear that they're living in a state of they're living in a state of precariousness, in the state of threat of dispossession, you know, I want to act. I want to speak up, because that's totally unacceptable, especially when it's a state that's speaking in my name, that's committing those horrible, that kind of discrimination. Again, for one reason and one reason only. There's not 2 reasons that Palestinians in East Jerusalem face discrimination and persecution and dispossession. There's only one reason, and that's because they're Palestinian. They were born to the wrong ethnicity and to the wrong nationality and to the wrong religion. That's it.
Zachary Foster, thank you so much for joining us here on the stream today. And for a better understanding of the current experiences of people living in occupied Palestinian territories, I would like to bring into the conversation now Shaden Qous, an Afro-Palestinian activist and law student, John Munayer, a Christian Palestinian theologian, and Amira Mohammed, a Palestinian peace activist with Israeli citizenship. Thank you all so much for joining us here on the stream for this conversation. Shaden, can I ask you about your experience in the African quarter of Jerusalem? In what ways does your Afro-Palestinian identity intersect with the broader Palestinian and local cultural identities in the Old City?
I was born and raised in the Old City in Jerusalem in the African community. I've lived all my entire life under occupation, and as we all know, life under occupation is difficult for all Palestinians, not just Palestinians living in Jerusalem, but also for the 2.3 million people living in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip right now. Israel has never hidden its expansionist plans in Palestine and has been actively working to fulfill these plans since 1948. Today in Jerusalem, these plans are clear from the ongoing land grab and home demolitions and revocation of residency cards from the Palestinians in the city. As for me, as a member of the African community in Jerusalem, I'm part of this patchwork of diverse communities in Jerusalem, and it is clear to me and to all us how occupation authorities try by every means to dismantle the fabric of these communities that make up the unique character of Jerusalem. For example, Israeli authorities ban every activity in the city that represents Palestinian cultural and heritage, including Afro-Palestinian culture. And I want to just point out that Palestinian diversity is multi-layered. The first original character of Palestinian society is diverse in natural, made up by different ethnic and social groups, such as us, part of these ethnic groups as Afro-Palestinians. But also the second level is man-made, created by the colonialist powers, primarily Israel, which divided Palestinians into geographical areas such as the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the 1948 territories inside the Green Line. However, this diversity is not part of the integral fabric of Palestinian society, but it is meant to divide, separate and isolate Palestinians from one, but it is meant to one another. And this separation was defined by the Israeli separation wall along and inside the West Bank, and the hundreds of military checkpoints that are put between all of these places.
John, you grew up in Jerusalem as well, and I want to ask you about a story I heard you tell about your father. He was driving you around. You were a kid. You guys were going to pick up some of your football teammates, and you told him not to answer the phone in case it was work, and he would have to answer in Arabic. And he told you then something very powerful.
Well, we have to understand that as a Palestinian growing up in Jerusalem, or a Palestinian growing up in other areas in the state of Israel, Palestinian identity is under threat or attack by different groups, or trying to be suppressed by the government. And therefore, when you're a child growing up in Jerusalem, you're often aware of who knows your identity, what might be the implications of someone knowing your identity, and therefore you might receive these types of stories that I told in a different context about me and my father. But at the end of the day, he did tell me to not be ashamed of my identity and to embrace it. But that's a very difficult and long journey that many Palestinians have to go through, regardless the way they live in, is basically fighting against these forces that try to suppress our identity. Absolutely.
But I still find that quote very powerful, to fight for who you are and not to be ashamed for who you are. Amira, you are a Palestinian Israeli. You grew up in Sheikh Jarrah. Can you tell us about your experience?
Well, my experience, I think, as you said, it is my experience. I can't speak for a Palestinian living in the West Bank and Gaza, or a Palestinian refugee, or someone who is a Palestinian who lives in diaspora. But my experience as a child, these words, occupation, occupier, difference between West Bank, East Jerusalem, even the difference between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem is not anything concrete that is touched while you're growing up. However, it creates you live in fear. One of the earliest memories that I have is coming back from school, just seeing a bunch of Israeli soldiers chanting and clapping for the demolition of the second story of my own home. And after I graduated, I wanted desperately to get into a great university, a good university, because education, Palestinians are one of the most educated people per capita. I wanted to go into the Hebrew University as an Israeli citizen, but because I graduated from the Palestinian education system, the Tawjihi, it was extremely difficult for me to enter and to get approved. So I in the end went to study in the West Bank in Al-Quds University, and just going every single day through checkpoints from East Jerusalem to West Jerusalem, where you're supposed to be, it's your home. It makes like a 20-minute ride into sometimes an hour and a half ride due to the checkpoints. And that's just like small stories of what it is like.
It is such a diverse and complicated upbringing that you guys all mention in each one in your respective ways. We want to bring it now to the whole idea of the identity of what it means to be Palestinian. We've seen this sentiment that Palestinians are not a monolith, shared quite often online on social media. Anelise, a Palestinian Christian artist, says the Palestinians are diverse. We come in all faiths, shapes, and sizes, and we will not allow you to erase our identities. And as always, Palestinian Christians stand hand in hand with our Muslim brothers and sisters. We are one. Shaden, how come, have you also come across this kind of oversimplified perception about Palestinians, and how do you go about communicating different ways, different realities, your reality, for example?
I mean, it is now very clear to us Palestinians, and for me as a Jerusalemite, that Israel's ultimate goal is to create a disunited and fragmented Palestinian people, including their national identity, which makes it easier for it to conquer and displace all the Palestinian territories. So for us, it's very clear for us to see all of these plans that have been happening since the 1948, and now, which is more clear after the 7th of October, and their goals are very clear to us. So that's why our main goal is just to be there in Palestine, and just our being in Jerusalem or any place in Palestine is our main goal and this is how we resist. And
to exist is an act of resistance.
Exactly.
John, how about you? Have you come across this kind of perception as well? The Palestinians are only one thing. And do you sense that right now, precisely because of what's happening in Gaza, there is an opportunity here to unite these different struggles and resist as one common identity with all these different layers within it?
Absolutely. I can't tell you the amount of times that people were surprised to find out that Palestinians can also be Christian. And I think during this Christmas period, that has perhaps been one of the louder voices coming out of Bethlehem, Jerusalem, specifically around Christmas, and the heads of churches announcing that this won't be a year of celebration. This won't be a year of joy for us. Instead, this is going to be a Christmas season of lament, because we are in grief of what is happening in Gaza, which, according to some and many international law experts, is an ethnic cleansing and genocide. We're also in lament for what is continuing to happen in the West Bank, the continued aggression there, and also for the victims of October 7th. So this year, during Christmas, I think the Palestinian Christian voice has been particularly loud, but this is a voice that has often been ignored by many international Christians, who often ignore the fact that there's a Christian, an indigenous Christian community here, but actually continue to support policies that eventually damage us and support the perhaps also ethnic cleansing of our community here. So we've seen recently evangelical pastors who have come from the US to put all sorts of drawings and signatures on different missiles that are going to be launched into Gaza. So I think people need to understand the diversity within Palestinian identity and history.
And I'm going to quote back to you again, because you said something very powerful. You said that you find in religion the tools to resist, making people in power uncomfortable, holding them accountable, you said, was what Jesus did. Are you starting to find common ground with other Christians across the world? And Do you think that this is actually coming through and they're listening to what you're saying more right now?
I think that through the Christmas season and the sort of focus on Bethlehem has allowed us to sort of speak about our Christian identity, theology, and religion in order to try and connect to other Christians around the world and for them to understand the context, the conflict, and the reality in which we live in. And this is particularly the case for many who have been following social media and different media platforms. We've seen the depiction of Jesus as a Palestinian or the nativity story happening inside of Gaza. So there's this strong theological understanding amongst Palestinians, both Muslim and Christians, that if Jesus was to be born today, he would be born in these very difficult circumstances. And this is something that is often misunderstood by both internationals or Israelis as well, that we're making a theological claim here that Jesus is on the side of the oppressed, whoever they are, and in whatever context. And in this context, it's a Palestinian child in Gaza.
Amira, I want to talk about what's been happening since October the 7th. Shaden mentioned there, settler attacks have reportedly more than doubled. Raids have intensified. We talk about some 200 Palestinians killed in the West Bank prior to October 7th. Since then, there were more than 300 that have been killed in the past 3 months. Can you tell us if you are sensing that the hostilities are getting worse around you?
Absolutely. I think that obviously every single escalation, every single war that happens needs to be put into context. You need to talk about what's happening during, after, and also prior to. The situation of East Jerusalem, in my opinion, or in our region, is a situation of bubbles. We live in multiple bubbles, and when you go in it, you're so submerged into that bubble that you only feel that that is the only reality. When it comes to East Jerusalem, I agree with both Shaden and John on how they said that there is a aspect of separation between the Palestinian people, a separation that is not just made by the occupier, by Israel, but also we practice it. Unfortunately, we sense the difference between a Jerusalemite and a West Banker, West Banker and 48 Arab. Unfortunately. But when it comes to difficulties after the 7th of October, you have the wall. East Jerusalem is not all inside of the Green Wall, of the Green Line. You have people, Palestinians, that work inside, that are residents of East Jerusalem, that work inside of either East Jerusalem or what is known as Israel, and can't go through because Israel practice collective punishment whenever any kind of escalation happens, whether that's the brutal attack on 7th of October or any other. So there's a severe employment issue and how Palestinians can get to their jobs. There's also, you mentioned the settler violence that has increased. There's also the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, that has issued some sort of civilian armed groups and increasing the amount of arms that is being distributed to civilians. How am I, as a Palestinian civilian, even as an Israeli citizen, how am I supposed to feel what a normal citizen of any country, safety, when any civilian of the other, that is known as the other, is armed and has the capacity of identifying whether I am a threat or not? And that's only part of it.
Shaden, your take here very briefly, if you may, also because we talked about very concrete ways there in terms of oppression, but even social media posts these days can get you arrested. So can you tell us if you've experienced anything like that?
Yes, sure. But we have to understand something in the beginning, but that what happened in the 7th of October was not a surprise to anyone. Nor was it unprovoked. What happened must be seen as part of the historical context the Palestinians live in, which is a 75-year-old illegal occupation. But after the 7th of October, Israel escalated its arbitrary and oppressive measures against Palestinians in Jerusalem, including tight restrictions such as the freedom of expression and movement after imposing their emergency regulations during wartime, which bans any Palestinian to even post something just any condolences with the people who were murdered in Gaza, or anything that has any part of what's happening in Gaza or during this war. So this policy of collective punishment on Palestinians has always been a policy used on the people under the occupation, which is not something new. However, it has used this excuse, Israel has used this excuse after the war on Gaza to take these measures to another level altogether. For me, like as a law student, I'm very aware that us Palestinians and people under any occupation in the world have the right to resist by all available means. And this is something that the international community doesn't focus on and keeps condemning Palestinians just for the right of resistance. So any mean and any way we use to fight and to be and to just live here is something legitimate for us. So this is something we also have to focus on, that we have these rights and we have to stay and we have to resist by all these available means.
John, how do you see the future of these communities? Where do we go from here? How do we restore, again, a sense of common fight and a struggle in order to get justice for all these peoples living in Palestinian territories?
Yeah, I would also just add that 2023, we just moved into 2024, but 2023 has been the most difficult year for Christians living in Jerusalem. There's been, at least in the second half of 2023, more than 60 reported attacks or cases of spitting or vandalizing church or Christian property, and about more than 10 to 15 statements by the heads of churches about these cases of attacks by mostly right-wing Israeli groups. And we just witnessed on the 28th of December, around 30 young Israeli extremists who attacked the Armenian community and church. They were masked. They attacked some of the clergy, men, women, and we're really seeing a crackdown on all Palestinians, but also on the Palestinian Christian community, which in Jerusalem, we're talking about around 10 to 12,000 people, so a very small community. I think we all need to ask ourselves, what is our vision for the future? Do we want to endorse a policy, a theology that wants all communities to live here in safety, in harmony, in equality? Or do we want to promote an ideology and theology that excludes certain ethnic, religious, or national groups? And I don't think that many of our communities, as well as Palestinians, we need to ask this as well. To what extent is our vision inclusive for others?
Amira, is this conversation even possible right now with everything that is happening in Gaza?
I think that this question, amazing question. I think this question should be asked not just only to Palestinians, but also to Israelis, because the wound is so fresh. The wound of the 7th of October is still in the memory of all Israelis and Palestinians alike, because some of the victims on the 7th of October were also Palestinians, one of which was an East Jerusalemite bus driver, actually. And that is, we need time. We need time. I don't think we can't wake up tomorrow morning and decide that we want to forget our wounds and forgive. However, we need to work towards that, because like John said, we need to decide first of all, who we are and what do we want, how do we want to be in the future, not just for us, not just the near future, but the future of the next generation. Do we want to infuel the cycle of violence and cycle of trauma to the next generation? Or do we want to fix and repair and learn from the pain of our ancestors, both Palestinian and Israeli? We see that happening, unfortunately, because of the current situation, because of the heat. It's all in silence. However, there are the peace activists are still alive. Peace activists are still working, and that's part of the complexity of being, one, a Palestinian Israeli, and two, of being a peace activist amongst one of the most violent times in my life personally.
Forgive, but certainly not forget, and then start a conversation potentially, but with time. Thank you all so much, Amira, Shaden, and John, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. And of course, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to stay in touch on social media. And if you have a topic or a conversation that you'd like to see us discuss here, all you have to do is use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we'll look into it. Take care, and I'll see you soon.